अस्सलाम वालेकुम, आप देख रहे हैं MM5 न्यूज़। मेरा नाम फ़हद है। नाज़रीन, पाकिस्तान में माउंटेनियरिंग का बेइंतहा पोटेंशियल मौजूद है। दुनिया की 14 बुलंद तरीन चोटियों में से 5 जो हैं वो पाकिस्तान में मौजूद हैं। पाकिस्तान ने बेशुमार माउंटेनियरिंग हीरोज़ भी पैदा किए हैं, लेकिन ये एक ऐसी खेल या ऐसी एक इंडस्ट्री है जिसके अंदर मज़ीद काफ़ी ज़्यादा पोटेंशियल है, और बस बहैसियत कौम, गवर्नमेंट एजेंसीज़, डिफरेंट जो बॉडीज़ हैं, उनको मिलकर इस इंडस्ट्री को जो है वो सपोर्ट करना होगा। नाज़रीन, आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत स्पेशल गेस्ट मौजूद हैं, वैनेसा और ब्रायन। इनके तारुफ के अंदर मुख्तलिफ जो है ये वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड्स जो हैं अपने नाम कर चुकी हैं। ये पहली ब्रिटिश और अमेरिकन खातून थी जिन्होंने K2 को सर किया। इसके साथ साथ गिनीज बुक ऑफ वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड में इनका नाम है। इन्होंने 295 दिन के अंदर जो है 7 समिट्स जो है वो अबूर किया। इसके साथ साथ ये पहली खातून है जिन्होंने दुनिया की बुलंद तरीन चोटी और दुनिया का जो डीपेस्ट ओशन का पॉइंट है, उन दोनों को जो है वो सर किया, यानी कि फ्रॉम द हाईएस्ट पीक इन द वर्ल्ड टू द डीपेस्ट part of Earth, she's done. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining MM5 News today. Absolutely delighted to be speaking to you. The first question to you is, obviously you've worked in the corporate sector for many, many years. So tell us what brought you from banks to base camps and from the stock market to summits. What was the inspiration there?
So for me, I had a catalyst, and the catalyst was the Great Recession in 2008 and 9, and I was looking for a challenge. And I was in Hong Kong at the time, and probably inspired by those tall buildings, I found myself looking and wondering what to do next. And somebody said the word Everest, 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 and it just echoed. And I thought, could I do it? How could I learn mountaineering? Would I be any good at it? Would I like it? How do you learn? And I went and literally, was Googling where it was, how high it was. I had remembered Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, but I wanted to see what it was like and whether I could do it. I never really thought I would leave the corporate world forever, but that's what ended up happening. And so I went to New Zealand, learned how to climb, and started the process. What's really important in the story, and I've of course written about it, which is in this book here, which hopefully it's just been translated into Polish and Russian, and I'm waiting for the Urdu translation as well, inshallah. And what we find is, as I'm Googling in the first part of the book, I'm with my reader learning about how to climb.
Yeah.
And climbing becomes a metaphor for what's happening when you're stuck in life. And there I am, stuck in life, trying to figure out what to do and how to move and how to pivot and how to take that step forward. So what I found is the book is helping people who are sort of stuck in life, ironically. So here I am, I go and I climb Everest, and very importantly, I have my first failure. And failure is very important and should not be something that we are ashamed of, because every entrepreneur will tell you failure is absolutely essential, as long as you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
And even when I go later on, after Everest, after the 7 summits, and I do make my way to K2, we remember it takes me 3 years. And those 3 years, I know even after that first year, I tried to hand back the UN Women flag to the UN Women of Pakistan, and they give it back to me and they say, oh no, I know you did it to the summit. And it almost brought tears to my eyes, that self-belief that they had in me, because one point, and what I would learn is that failure, absolute failure, that you cannot fail unless you give up.
Yeah.
And that's very, very important for people to take away. You do not fail unless you give up.
Yeah. And
so, perseverance is very, very important. Resiliency is very, very important. So if I had not gone, every year on K2, I'm learning more. I'm getting one camp higher. There's different reasons.
Yeah.
But if I had not gone every 3 years in a row, I would never have built the relationships with the people of Pakistan or understood Pakistan,
Yeah.
and ultimately,
Yeah.
became the ambassador that I became.
And tell us, Vanessa, you've written that when you were born, all the 8,000ers had been summited, and that's actually really important for us. Where in today's generation, we look around. Obviously, the Americas have been discovered. All the major things. You kind of look around and you feel, is there anything left to explore or do for us? And obviously there's a lot of space exploration going on, and there's things, but I think commonly people do feel that there's nothing left that they could add to the world. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so that is an important part, because if I had woke up and said, oh, everything's already been done, I would be very discouraged.
Yeah.
Because then I would do nothing. I think the important thing to remember, because mountaineering in its day, when it was first, I'm looking at a mountain, which is why I peek up, it's on the wall behind you. Every mountain, the big 8,000ers, of which there's 14 all in Asia, these big boys were part of the fascination in the 50s, and countries competed for superiority to become the first.
Yeah.
And nations in the time could only get permits. These weren't really given, only one country at a time could get a permit. And, those went one after the other. Each country sort of grabbed a mountain.
Yeah.
So you would have, the US and Italy competed over K2, for example. The UK, no doubt, was going to get Everest. It had almost blocked everybody else from that ability to do anything else. But it was amazing to watch that. But if I had looked and said, okay, everything's already been taken, and also, by the way, almost for women as well, because all these mountains had been climbed for women, I would say, okay, well, I can do nothing in this space. But that's not true, because over time things change. So when I talked to the mountaineers then, some of the, I like to call them old timers, but I do that affectionately. So I never do that, with any disrespect. When they climbed in their day, they climbed in an environment completely different.
Yeah.
The mountains were cold. They had a lot of ice, a lot of snow. Today, with climate change, the things that we have to put up with, the rock fall, for one. The rock fall, that's what happened to me on K2 in the first season. We had rock fall coming down with so much speed and uncertainty. Never did they have this in the old days, because they didn't have the climate change.
Yeah.
Rock used to be frozen.
Yeah.
Now it's just, crumbling away. And it's much more dangerous from that perspective.
Yeah.
Also samples, we are the boots on the ground. We can go take these samples. We can find that contamination from Fukushima and places like that settled in these mountains. That never affected mountaineers in the old days. It affects us today. So climate change is huge, and we can play a big role in that. Also, nowadays there's more people. Nobody in the old days had to put up with that. So we can do things, and also there's the individual. Can I do it?
Yes.
That never goes away.
Yeah.
But you can contribute to something, which is another motivation. And also the times have changed. So there's 3 boxes there to tick.
And competing with yourself, I guess that is, the ultimate thing,
Yeah, absolutely. So you can compete with yourself, you can give back, and you can also remember it's a different time. So it's not one-to-one to the past, because, they had older gear. Yes, they didn't have, weather stations, but they didn't have the queue of people that we have today. And they did not have the rock fall and the climate change. So some things are good, some things are worse.
So Vanessa, tell me, obviously coming to your relationship with Pakistan, obviously it took you 3 attempts to finally summit K2. And obviously it's really, really hard to turn back, almost saying no to an opportunity. You've planned the whole year, you're almost there, but deciding to go back. So it took you three times, three attempts. So tell us about K2, and obviously, with that, the relationship that developed with Pakistan, and you, are a goodwill ambassador for Pakistan, strong connections to the country. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so my relationship with the country happened in a very interesting and different way, because I was doing research to go to climb K2 around 2013 and 2014. It was after the Nangma Parbat incident that happened with some climbers, that was unfortunate at base camp. And there was just a lot of negative press around Pakistan, and all I could find as an outsider was just negativity around the country.
Yeah.
And I didn't at the time have any Pakistan friends that I could turn to find out what was happening, what was real, what was not real.
Yeah.
And so, but I, had a connection in London, and that was sort of my first, footprint. And so when I started reaching out to people in London, I was amazed how quickly one connection turned to two, turned to three, and suddenly it was like there was a Pakistan network available.
Yeah.
And I have never seen anything like that happen so quickly. And there were some key individuals in there. Christiane Bakker was one. She's written some books as well. She was a former MTV presenter, a German person. I don't know if she did it in Germany or here. She was very, very critical in the early stages of connecting me with different people. And Arif Anis, who has written a book as well. He's done lots of different things. He introduced me to the World Congress of Overseas Pakistanis, the American Pakistan Foundation. There were a whole bunch of different things, but long story short, despite all those connections, there was still, what's it like on the ground, and how do I get there? What do I do? It was great to have some connections and some endorsements, but it didn't necessarily translate to what was going to happen when I got there. But once I got there, some beautiful things happened just in the country, unrelated to the other things that were happening around the world. And I have never experienced anywhere else just the hospitality of the local people, just known or unknown. It was unbelievable. And this is everywhere from, high end to just the simplicity of the local people in the villages. It was just an amazing experience. And very, very quickly, I wanted to try to do my best to try to, in whatever little way I could, help people understand that the people-to-people contact is very important, and whatever microphone I could get to try to correct some of the misconceptions about the country that were being experienced. So I took the years that I was climbing to come back and tell the stories of the actual experiences versus what the press was being fed, which I thought was very incorrect. So it was as if the press had an agenda, which it very well could have. And I really don't like the politics of it. I don't like to get involved in the politics of it. I carry the flags representing the nationalities because that was something that the old mountaineers used to do. They carried the flags of the countries of which they carried passports. Generally one in the old days of the United Nations at large. I translated it to UN Women because it was more topical. And the country in which they were climbing in. So I didn't do anything that people didn't do in 1933. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And, but what was different in my opinion was that in 1933, and maybe it was because there wasn't media or as popular or global as a media, it wasn't being used as a political weapon in a way.
Yeah.
but I really, I felt very strongly because, you know, I was getting sometimes I was getting attacked for, why are you going? And you know, are you trying to be, is there political messaging in what you're doing? It's like, no, I'm me. I'm not on one side. I'm not on the other side. I don't represent anybody. You know, it's just that I am trying to say that these are the countries that I travel to and where the mountains are. They are in Nepal, they are in Tibet, and they are in Pakistan. And if you want, those are where there's 14 8,000 meter peaks. Those are the 3 countries they are in.
5 of them are in Pakistan.
5, yeah. So, you know, and these are beautiful areas. And, you know, to think that the world, you know, the population of the world cannot come and see these things is not right. Pakistan is not saying they cannot come.
And I guess in many ways you were lucky as well, because I mean, you know, obviously Pakistan was getting a lot of negative press, not a lot of tourists, which means not a lot of climbers as well. So maybe a lot of the experiences that you had were quite raw, quite unrefined, you know, not very touristy, and you got to experience the real undisturbed nature as well, and mountains to some extent.
Yeah, you know, and I, you know, people don't need necessarily to have red carpets rolled out for them. You know, they just want to travel and be able to see things. Nobody likes to have things canceled, planes canceled, or you know, delays. But that's true everywhere in the world.
You
know, when I go to Pakistan, I have to go either through Dubai or through Abu Dhabi. Those are the 2. You know, and nobody wants to have delays, you know, even when you're in country. So I think opening up Skardu as an international airport, I've advocated that.
And they've started flights from Lahore and Karachi to Skardu and Gilgit as well, which would solve a lot of the problems. Okay, Vanessa, tell me, obviously K2 took you 3 attempts. And, you know, you've mentioned obviously your book as well. It's not just about mountaineering, it's about human beings and our challenges and our, you know, our troubles and our motivations in life. So obviously, how hard was it to say no? And, you know, what does it mean in our, in our day-to-day lives as well? A lot of times, you know, we invest a lot of time and effort into something. You know, when do you know that it's the time to sort of step back and say no, or okay, I'll try again, or it's time to quit? You know, obviously we hear, you know, never quit and keep going and all of that, but there are also instances where you have to quit or withdraw for a certain amount of time and then reattempt. What would you say to that?
So, you know, every situation is different. Every situation is different. That's why I can't give you a number absolute for every situation. You know, and yesterday I was just on the phone with somebody who is trying very, very hard to have children. And they are trying, you know, different things, and, you know, eventually I think they will adopt, but until then they try, you know, different scientific things to bring this together to happen naturally, right? But of course it's very emotional, you know, and it's expensive. How many times, they say, how many times? Now, there isn't a right or wrong answer to how many times. But there are comparisons. So in this particular example, I think, you know, there was, I think it had taken something like maybe 7 times to pass a CFA. So would you not give at least the equal amount of times to pass an exam to have the child?
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
I would say go for 7. 7 is a lucky number.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
it deserves at least that.
Yeah.
And then you can compare and at least set your mind at ease that you tried your best.
Yeah.
Then maybe adopt.
Yeah.
So you can think logically about something and think about something rationally that makes sense and puts you at ease. You know, for K2, would I have tried a 4th time, if not a 3rd time? You
I
know,
think you would have.
Well, you know, and it's, nobody can ever answer that question in a rear view mirror. You know, I remember, you know, year 1, you got to camp 2, year 2, you got to camp 3. Wow, there's only 4 in Summit, right? But there was data and there was information every single time. And so year 3, we were the only team to make it. And people criticized us for taking a lot of risk. However, there was nothing that we did that wasn't unlike other teams in the past that did it. Yeah. Did it take 16 hours? Yes, but so did those other teams. It was perfectly normal.
Yeah.
K2 is never easy. And nobody ever has exactly the same experience. Yeah. Nobody. Yeah. Yeah. You have a unique weather. You have a unique year. Yeah. And nobody's experiences are ever the same.
And I guess when you're on the mountains, it's, I mean, quite literally, you're living on the edge. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, it's harder ascending it, but also descending. And, you know, what we saw this year as well, unfortunately, even acclimatizing, you know, a few people sort of lost their lives on a routine acclimatization. So I guess it's quite difficult to know, you know, what that threshold of risk would be. I guess you make your best judgment given the readings that you have in front of you. But then tell me, you know, calling off an expedition, obviously, it's not just yourself, it's the team that you've built up, the sponsorships, the finances, the logistics, the pressures. You know, does all of that come into play? And does that make it quite hard compared to if it was just, you know, one person and then, you know, the economics were not that difficult? Do those factors come into play as well?
You know, it's very hard to, yes, everything comes into play and everybody has a different risk appetite. You know, the larger the expedition, the more likely you are to call something off because you're going to be determined by your weakest link, which is probably your weakest climber. And you probably will have stashed, say, more, not less gear. If something avalanches, you'll lose more stuff, which is more value. Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot of decisions that go into that. Also, you know, people, you're not dealing necessarily with objects, you're dealing with people and people's emotions. Yeah. People tend to, you know, let empty space or a lot of time, you know, they can fill their heads with irrational fear too, which isn't helpful. And, you know, it's hard to motivate and encourage and, you know, if people are just scared and they're irrationally scared, and even if they're superstitious, that's even worse. You know, you can't really work around things like that. And also, you know, if one team has friends in another team and they're all going home, you know, you're working against a sway. So, you know, the funny thing is, it's sometimes when I talk about expeditions, it's, you know, I've got these charts, you know, that talk about sort of human behavior, but it's quite hard to keep the focus on the summit and the goal, because even if you think people's intentions are aligned,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to get to the same place, they will often disagree about how
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
when.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even those simple things can destroy, an expedition. That's why it's always important to have a
Yeah.
leader
Yeah.
and to agree to, to give
Yeah.
for the decision making to go to
Yeah.
one.
And Vanessa, obviously, you've mentioned the potential Pakistan has in terms of, 5 of the 14 highest peaks in the world, huge potential in adventure tourism, mountaineering. And I guess, unfortunately, earlier this year, we saw, some sad events unfold. Ali Satbara, along with JP Moore and John Snorri and a few others as well, they were trying to be the first team to summit K2 in winters. We were talking about the firsts, and even in 2021, there are still lots of firsts left. So unfortunately, we lost them. But on the flip side, that got a lot of people in Pakistan talking about K2, about mountaineering, about the need for better support and training, particularly better, working environment for the porters. And you obviously, you knew those climbers, and you were also part of the team that was trying to, locate them and, coordinate the search and rescue mission. So tell us, your insights from this episode. What did we learn? And what can the Pakistani government or different organizations do in the future to develop this into a more sustainable sort of sport or industry, particularly around tourism as well, and promoting the soft image of Pakistan?
Yeah, absolutely. I did see Imran Khan announced a package for Gilgit-Baltistan, which has a tourism development amount earmarked, which is great. I think that's fantastic. They're not going to give up on that area. That area is it's a gateway to so many things. Not only development, with CPEC and some of the other things, but tourism it has a massive potential. And that's not just international tourism. In fact, international is a tiny, tiny bit.
Yeah.
Domestic tourism is huge.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, if you build it, they will come. Because even domestic tourism, the demand has outstripped the supply. The tourists have come domestically, and they cannot find the hotels. They're sleeping in the cars and everything else. They have to build more. So that's fantastic. I think, and that's always the first market, to serve, and it's great. Internationally, also, tourists will come. They'll come from Europe. They'll come from UK. Already from Asia and US as well. So that is fantastic. Infrastructure absolutely has to be there. Skardu Airport is fantastic if that gets built up internationally. Domestic flights, absolutely get those down. That helps a lot. And then test those international flights. Test it first with China, doesn't matter. But what you're testing really is the air traffic control, getting an international immigration sorted, those are the things you want to get sorted, and then you can add anything, right? And you want the pilots to be trained so that they can, they can develop the runway in difficult weather, because we know Skardu has, some of the jet streams and things where they have to land the planes in more difficult conditions. But I'll tell you, Singapore's worse. Right? We've all traveled to places where those pilots have to, remember the old Hong Kong airport, right? You were right smack in the middle of something. So, once the pilots can do that, that's fantastic. Winter K2 was one of the most difficult things for me to have been a part of. Obviously, I climbed with John on my 2017 year, which was successful. I was part of the search and rescue team. It was very, very difficult. I had given Ali flags, not only the Pakistan flags, but of course flags for he lovingly called the NGO. It was the Scientific and Exploration Society of London. Ellie had so many friends across the world.
Yeah.
John was just an absolutely lovely, climber who had been there the year before in winter as well. Those two were two of the most solid climbers, much less in winter. I just, we don't know what happened is the long and short of it. And, they will go and look in summer. So, it's May now, they'll start in June. It will be an all Pakistan-led search. And, inshallah, we will get something, we will find something, because there's no reason they could not have made it to the summit. I think what we'd like to know is if we can locate bodies, to see what we can find on them. Some film footage, between the three of them, one of them would have had something on them.
And it was heartening to see. I'm sure you would have followed on social media as well, how the entire country came together. They were praying and hoping for a miracle, and and it's a testament, obviously, the legacy that Ali Satpara has left in terms of people now talking about K2, people now talking about Gilgit-Baltistan, the facilities that are needed, the support for the porters, the education and the skills development, and hopefully that would help, uplift that part of Pakistan and give good livelihoods to people that are associated with supporting these fantastic expeditions that take place. And on behalf of the entire Pakistani nation, I'd like to thank you as well for for the work that you did in supporting the search and rescue. Finally, Weinessa, on a slightly positive.
Let me just add one thing to that. Nepal has something called the KCC, the Khumbu Climbing School, and it's been established for a long time. But it's a international board that puts together and certifies all the climbers, so the Sherpa, and they all go through a program. So the Sherpa effectively are trained not only in the hard skills of climbing, but they're trained in the soft skills of leadership. What to look out for frostbite. Medicine. What is the high altitude medicine? How to take care of a climber, how to interact, in hospitality. And I just think, I always sort of joked that KCC, you wouldn't even have to change the name, because K could be Karakoram, right?
Yes.
Khumbu Karakoram.
Yeah.
But having a program like that would be so important. And, politically, don't fight so much, whether it's Alpine Club or, GB or, if we could just get the politics aside and do the right thing to have the training. It's actually the training and the certification, because what I really want is for the high altitude porters to command the same salaries as the Sherpa.
Yes.
And that is contingent on the knowledge. And the knowledge starts by, just starting over and saying, okay, I know how to put in the fixed lines. I know how to, but all of that starts with just funding to put together a curriculum, and then taking all the HAPs that want to stand up and say, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then they get their certification, and then we can figure out, who wants to administer it. Is it Pakistan Army?
Yeah.
Is it, Pakistan Alpine Club?
Yeah.
It probably cannot be with the local outfitter because they'll fight that they also do tourism, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be equity, and it has to stand outside of somebody else.
Yeah.
But it really has to be, it has to be fair, and it has to serve the community so that anybody who comes says, okay, I know these guys are as good as, and then you don't have to worry about taking outside help.
Yeah.
Through all my years of climbing, people said, but why are the Sherpa coming? You don't need to have the Sherpa if you have qualified people.
Yeah.
It's okay, we train. Yeah. But it starts with money, and it starts with, you can bring the people in. Because I think North Face is probably one of the big sponsors of the Nepalese program. Mm-hmm. And we also have Chinese that are great manufacturers of clothing. Torrid is one. Yeah. But it's finding those local partners, to come in and say, and even brand it. Yeah.
And ensuring that's done in a sustainable way. And I know Imran Khan talks about it all the time. When he talks about tourism, he always mentions the sustainability side, because, it's important that, these places are protected. And, and I know Sajid Satbara is conducting a mission in the summers to clean up the ropes over K2. Yes. And I think that's so important as well, taking that collective responsibility to take care of our northern areas. Yeah. Weinesa, finally, tell us about the greatest heights. Obviously, I know you've, what can readers expect? When and how can they get hold of the book? And I know you've mentioned some really interesting, conversations you've had in Pakistan in the book. So what can people expect? How can they get hold of a copy? And when is it going to be available?
Okay, so the book is out in London. It is. You can get it on amazon.co.uk. Okay. I really am trying to find a format in Pakistan, and really it's about finding a publisher. So when I talked about the first foreign rights in Poland and Russia, it's because two publishers have come forward and said, I want to have this translated into a foreign language and into this market. Yeah. So it's really trying to find a publisher in Pakistan, and Pakistan doesn't quite operate like there isn't Amazon there, for example, and there isn't even Alibaba that way. So it's hard to find a distribution network. Yeah. And I have had people looking. So, and people are saying, well, can you just give me a way to download? And I'd be happy to do that if there was a technological way. So I am looking very closely.
But can people in Pakistan now buy e-copies on Amazon? I think they can. Because the Kindle version and the e-version, that should be available, I think.
See if I go to Amazon India, it's there.
Okay.
.ie.
Right.
But I don't know that Amazon sells to Pakistan, or who would own that.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
So to me, the publishing market in Pakistan is not as developed, or needs to be developed.
Yeah.
And I have talked to some of the larger bookstores to say, how do we make this happen? And how do people read? Yeah. Because clearly, most of it, by the way, is on a device, a mobile device, and mobile is always more popular.
Yes.
But in mobile, they want a PDF or they want audio.
Yes. Yeah.
And really, it should be available both in English and both in Urdu.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
They will want both.
Yes.
It depending where you are in the city or in the country.
Yes.
So if you have ideas of this, let me know. But I also am looking very, very hard to find a way in, because right now I cannot find somebody to stand up and say, I can do this. Yeah. And maybe Dubai also has close relationship with the country. Yep. Maybe it would be through Dubai.
Absolutely. And I'm sure some of our viewers today would we also have some ideas. So we'll pop your web links and your website here as well. Yes,
Help me get
absolutely.
the book into
Yes. Yeah.
because you know, I've talked to so many people, local bookstores, things like that. I have sent 20 copies over to
Yeah.
somebody and said, you know, give this to so, but
Yes.
this
Yeah.
is not the way to go.
No.
You know,
No.
the way to go is for somebody to be able to download.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if I go to Amazon in India, they're
Yeah.
downloading like, you know, the $5 rupee equivalent.
I think, you know, because, you know, for physical products, I can imagine, you know, there's no shipping or anything. But if someone goes to an international Amazon version and they have an account and they just buy it and they get the link, I think it should work for, obviously, it'll be a very small segment of Pakistani society who are on the internet, who are on the international, you know, Amazon versions, etc. But obviously for the masses, here's a task for all our viewers as well. If you know any translators and publishers that want to bring this fantastic book to Pakistan, you know, do get in touch with Vanessa. We'll put her website underneath the tickers as well, so you can get in contact with her.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been really challenging to do this, yet, you know, there are so many people that I want to read it. And by the way, there are real names in here, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I'll never forget the first time I videoed my, you know, my cook from, you know, at base camp, and he was so proud, and he kept sending it to everybody. And his brother said, "Please do not ever record him. He won't stop showing me the video." Right? But it's so sweet. And when people are mentioned, you know, it's a point of pride.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah,
but right now
you will, and we're behind you. Will be fully supporting you, and you know, inshallah, the book goes really well. Any final words, Vanessa, to everyone in Pakistan who's watching?
Well, I know right now is also a tough time because you know, people are also going through lockdown and coming out, and you know, I will say we will get through this. Just you know, persevere. You know, we've been through much harder things than this collectively as a country. So be patient, and soon we will be able to get back to where we want to be, which is socializing, being together, and, you know, going back to prosperity. Pakistan was at its most prosperous for me in 2017 when I saw the stock market and, you know, everything booming. I want to get back to that and help the country develop its sectors and its businesses and tourism and all of that.
Great.
So I can't wait to see you again.
Great. Thank you so much. नाज़रीन, आप देख रहे थे वनेसा और ब्रायन का ख़ुसूसी इंटरव्यू यहाँ MM5 न्यूज़ पर। एक बहुत इंस्पिरेशनल खातून है, गिनीज बुक ऑफ वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड में जो है मुख्तलिफ रिकॉर्ड अपने नाम कर चुकी हैं। लेकिन इसके साथ साथ जो एजाज़ की बात है वो ये है कि पाकिस्तान की जो है गुडविल एम्बेसडर हैं, पाकिस्तान को बहुत चाहती हैं, पाकिस्तान के लिए हर प्लेटफॉर्म पे जो है आवाज़ उठाती हैं, पाकिस्तान की प्रॉस्पेरिटी के लिए, टूरिज्म सेक्टर को डेवलप करने के लिए। उनकी आपने आज बातें सुनी। वो तो माउंटेनियर हैं, जाहिर है K2 माउंट एवरेस्ट और दुनिया की जो है डीपेस्ट ओशन तक जा चुकी हैं, लेकिन जो इनकी लाइफ से लेसन हमें मिलते हैं वो हम जिंदगी के किसी भी शोबे में, किसी भी फील्ड के अंदर इंप्लीमेंट कर सकते हैं, चाहे वो जॉब हो, बिजनेस हो, पर्सनल लाइफ हो। इनकी किताब जो है द ग्रेटेस्ट हाइट्स वो लॉन्च कर दी गई है, अवेलेबल है Amazon पर, दीगर प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे आप इसको जो है वो बाय कर सकते हैं, और अनकरीब जो है ये बुक पाकिस्तान में भी लॉन्च की जाएगी। तो आप वनेसा और ब्रायन की ये खसूसी गुफ्तगू देख रहे थे MM5 न्यूज़ के साथ। हमारे साथ जुड़े रहिए मजीद खबरों और अपडेट के लिए।